From the edge of infinity, something approaches, silent, cold, and ancient. Astronomers first thought it was just another wandering comet drifting through space. But this time, they were wrong, because this one isn't alone. Thousands of smaller bodies are following it, like a cosmic swarm trailing behind a queen. 10,000 companions, moving in perfect harmony through the blackness. Scientists call it 3I Atlas, an interstellar traveler from a place no telescope has ever seen. But the deeper they look, the stranger it becomes. What if those fragments aren't random debris? What if each of them carries information, traces of a civilization long vanished, or worse, technology designed to study us? The James Webb Space Telescope has confirmed something that defies every natural explanation. And tonight, we'll uncover why this discovery could rewrite what we thought we knew about life beyond our solar system. When the Atlas telescope first detected the object racing across the night sky, nothing seemed unusual. But as its orbit was calculated, the truth emerged. 3I Atlas wasn't from here. Its hyperbolic trajectory proved it was a traveler from another star, moving at a staggering velocity of over 26 kilometers per second relative to the Sun. Within days, the world's most powerful observatories turned their gaze toward it, and what they saw defied all logic. The main body was small, around 800 meters in diameter, but trailed by a massive cloud stretching over 120,000 kilometers, filled with thousands of discrete fragments. The James Webb Telescope and ground-based radio arrays confirmed the unthinkable. Roughly 10,000 individual objects were moving in perfect synchronization, their orbits nearly identical, as if they were obeying some hidden command. Comets break apart all the time, but never like this. Never so organized, never so controlled. Whatever this swarm was, it wasn't behaving like a natural fragmentation. It was coordinated. James Webb's instruments soon revealed that 3I Atlas was chemically unlike any comet ever studied. Its surface and gaseous emissions contained water, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen cyanide, but in proportions unlike anything found in our solar system. Even more stunning was the detection of amino acid precursors, molecules like formamide and acetaldehyde, key to the chemistry of life itself. The isotopic ratios of hydrogen, carbon, and nitrogen confirmed what astronomers suspected. This object had formed under completely different stellar conditions in another planetary system. But the biggest surprise came from its stability. While most comets flare dramatically as they near a star, 3I Atlas remained steady, releasing gases at a constant rate, almost as if it were regulating its own activity. And hidden within its thermal data were heat signatures far too localized, far too stable, the kind that suggested internal processes at work. Was it venting gas or maintaining energy? The line between science and something else began to blur. Across telescopes in Arizona, Chile, and space, scientists confirmed what had once seemed impossible. The fragments trailing 3I Atlas were moving in formation. Their relative velocities were too low, their structure too precise. Some fragments even displayed faint signs of cometary activity, miniature tails and jets, as if they were alive, still venting volatile gases after millions of years in interstellar space. The swarm appeared to be divided into 7 distinct families, each maintaining a subtle but measurable difference in trajectory, almost like specialized groups within a system. The odds of a natural comet surviving a journey of tens of millions of years and arriving in our solar system with its fragments still intact are virtually zero. The cohesion was too perfect, the timing too precise. Could this be the result of a resonant fragmentation, a kind of harmonic disintegration where the pieces separate in perfect rhythm? Or could it be something far more deliberate, an engineered array of interstellar probes traveling together under the disguise of a cometary cloud? When scientists plotted the fragments' orbits, they noticed something eerie. The swarm wasn't random. It formed patterns, arcs, spirals, and dense clusters that repeated with geometric precision. Some even aligned along magnetic field lines detected by polarimetric instruments, hinting at an underlying magnetized structure. Radio telescopes listening to the region picked up faint rhythmic fluctuations within the radio background, nothing that could be identified as a signal, yet repeating too consistently to ignore. To skeptics, it was noise. To others, it was coordination. Each fragment, no matter its size, appeared to maintain position as if following an invisible grid. Some researchers proposed that 3I Atlas might once have been part of a planetary crust torn apart by gravity. Others whispered about a machine world, long dead, now scattering its remnants across the stars. But when James Webb captured thermal anomalies emanating from several of the larger fragments, identical in temperature, perfectly synchronized, one conclusion began to take hold. Maybe these weren't fragments at all. Maybe they were nodes, parts of something still functioning, still aware, and now inside our solar system. Soon after the discovery of the swarm's geometry, the James Webb Space Telescope began detecting an even stranger phenomenon: faint fluctuations in the infrared spectrum of light reflected by the 10,000 fragments. When the signal was isolated and amplified, researchers realized it wasn't random variation. The fragments were pulsing in harmony, emitting microscopic changes in brightness at regular intervals. The rhythm was too consistent to be coincidence, identical cycles repeating every 147 seconds across every observable fragment. In other words, the swarm was synchronized. Some scientists suggested it could be a form of rotational resonance, perhaps caused by solar radiation pressure. But others, analyzing the timing, noticed that the sequence followed a mathematical progression based on the Fibonacci ratio, a pattern found throughout living systems, galaxies, and even atomic structures. Was this cosmic coincidence or evidence of design? The debate fractured the astronomical community. Because if 10,000 interstellar fragments were all oscillating in the same precise rhythm, the universe had either orchestrated an impossible accident or someone had built it to happen. Then came a discovery that shook even the skeptics. When the Hubble Space Telescope attempted to photograph the swarm using polarized filters, it found that light scattering from each fragment didn't behave normally. Instead of diffusing in random directions, the light reflected back toward the source, a behavior known as retroreflection, something common in engineered materials but virtually non-existent in nature. Retroreflectors are used on Earth in satellites, road signs, and robotic sensors, structures specifically designed to return light precisely to where it came from. Yet here, floating millions of kilometers from Earth, 10,000 fragments were doing exactly that. It was as if the entire swarm had been built to be seen, a massive reflective array designed to signal or communicate through geometry and light. More astonishingly, the angles of reflection formed interference fringes that, when analyzed mathematically, resembled a binary pattern, repeating clusters of on-off states encoded across the entire structure. If this was random physics, it was the most articulate accident in the history of the cosmos. Not long after the mirror anomaly, new data from Webb's near-infrared spectrograph revealed low-frequency electromagnetic waves rippling between the fragments. These weren't solar emissions or cosmic rays. They were coherent, steady, and moving from object to object as if transferring information. Each wave carried subtle variations in phase, building a rhythmic chain that wrapped around the entire swarm. Some physicists began referring to it as the living field, a self-sustaining electromagnetic environment that seemed to connect the objects into one functional system. When mapped in 3 dimensions, the field resembled the neural structure of a brain or the circuitry of an enormous machine, extending over thousands of kilometers. No known natural mechanism could produce such long-range coherence between disconnected bodies. Either this was a phenomenon beyond our physics, or 3I Atlas wasn't a comet at all. It was something larger, something integrated, and it had just come online. Then, the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory detected a whisper in gravity itself. Subtle but measurable shifts in the solar wind's density appeared each time the swarm passed through a specific orbital node. The effect repeated every orbit, precise to the millisecond, creating a gravitational echo that shouldn't exist. As models were built to simulate the behavior, they revealed an extraordinary truth. The swarm's distribution wasn't chaotic, it was tuned. The combined mass and spacing of the fragments created a harmonic relationship with Mars's orbital resonance, amplifying gravitational waves on a microscopic level. In essence, 3I Atlas and its companions were producing a signal through gravity like an enormous cosmic instrument playing notes on spacetime. No natural swarm could achieve such synchronization. It was too balanced, too aware of its own mechanics. And for the first time, scientists were forced to ask a question that had always seemed too far-fetched. What if 3I Atlas didn't enter our solar system by chance, but because it was meant to? As the swarm continued its path across the solar system, the rhythmic pulses once detected by Webb began to intensify, not in amplitude, but in coherence. The 10,000 objects seemed to be aligning themselves into a larger formation, as though responding to an external signal no one could detect. Their spacing adjusted by imperceptible degrees, forming a lattice that spanned hundreds of thousands of kilometers. When mapped digitally, the shape resembled a hollow spiral surrounding 3I Atlas at its center, a configuration strikingly similar to antenna arrays used on Earth to transmit long-range signals. Observatories across the world recorded synchronized bursts of electromagnetic noise every time the swarm passed through this configuration, each burst followed by a faint echo from deep space. Whatever the source, it wasn't random. Some hypothesized that 3I Atlas was using the swarm to amplify a message. Others suggested the opposite, that the objects were receiving one. Either way, the geometry was too deliberate to be dismissed. It was as if the swarm had just switched modes, transitioning from silence to communication. Then came the phenomenon no one expected. During one of the swarm's observation cycles, several telescopes recorded transient shadows, brief moments when individual fragments dimmed and brightened in exact sequences, forming repeating patterns of light and darkness. When stitched together, the changes produced a pulse train pattern eerily similar to binary code. But the strangest part wasn't the pattern itself. It was what happened next. The same intervals appeared hours later in background radiation readings from Webb, mirrored perfectly in the electromagnetic spectrum. The timing, amplitude, and repetition were identical. It was as if the swarm had projected the same code across multiple wavelengths, visible, infrared, and radio, all simultaneously. When the data was visualized, it revealed something no one expected: a symbolic structure, a recurring motif resembling a fractal spiral enclosed within a triangle. To mathematicians, it looked like an encoded instruction. To astronomers, it looked like a signature. The universe was no longer silent. It was speaking, through geometry, through light, and through the cold precision of 3I Atlas. As the swarm drifted closer to the inner solar system, it began to interact with Mars's magnetic field. Instruments aboard orbiters detected faint radio interference originating not from the planet, but from space directly above it, interference that pulsed in the exact same pattern as the 3I Atlas signal. Then, the impossible happened. During the interference peaks, Mars's ionosphere briefly lit up with a faint green auroral flash, lasting only seconds, synchronized with each pulse from the swarm. It was as if the planet was responding, amplifying or reflecting whatever the swarm was transmitting. Analysis showed that the energy levels involved were far below those of solar wind activity, ruling out natural causes. And yet, the synchronization was perfect. The fragments seemed to be using Mars as a relay, bending their transmissions through its electromagnetic field. When visualized, the trajectory of the swarm relative to Mars formed a geometrically flawless equilateral alignment, a configuration so precise that the margin of error was less than 1 part in 10 million. The swarm wasn't just passing through the solar system, it was interacting with it, deliberately. Then, as the swarm moved behind the sun, temporarily hidden from every telescope on Earth, the transmissions suddenly spiked. Radio observatories across the planet recorded an intense wideband emission, followed by total silence. When data from space-based detectors arrived hours later, the true nature of the signal became clear. The burst wasn't a single wave, it was a sequence of nested pulses, perfectly timed, expanding outward from the sun in a spiral motion identical to the swarm's formation pattern. Each pulse carried harmonic layers, repeating ratios found in atomic transitions and orbital resonances. The implications were staggering. The swarm had transmitted through the sun, using it as a medium or amplifier. And when the signal reached the outer edge of the solar system, deep space antennas like Voyager's old network recorded a faint echo, the same pattern, but inverted, as if something out there had replied. The message had gone out, and something in the dark had answered. For days, space remained silent. Then, one morning, every deep space monitoring station from Canberra to Madrid reported the same anomaly, a faint but structured signal returning from the outer edge of the solar system. At first, scientists believed it to be the echo of the previous transmission bouncing off interstellar dust. But when the frequency was analyzed, the truth became clear. The signal was different. It wasn't a reflection, it was a reply. Its harmonic structure mirrored the original swarm's pulse but contained variations too specific to be random. The waveform carried sequences of prime number intervals, a mathematical hallmark of intelligent communication. Even more unsettling, embedded within the amplitude shifts was a modulation that, when decoded into spatial coordinates, pointed directly back to 3I Atlas's last recorded location, as if whatever had answered was acknowledging its origin. Radio telescopes locked onto the signal, tracing it as it grew stronger and more refined, evolving into something eerily rhythmic, a heartbeat from the edge of space, pulsing in perfect time with the 10,000 fragments now hidden behind the sun. Then the fragments began to move. Their orbits, once stable and synchronized, suddenly shifted in unison, expanding outward like the petals of a vast cosmic flower. The entire formation changed shape, from a spiral around 3I Atlas into a vast spherical shell, encircling the region between Mars and the asteroid belt. Observatories watched in disbelief as the swarm began reflecting sunlight in coordinated flashes, creating patterns that repeated across the entire structure. Some appeared to form rotational sequences, spinning slowly around the central void where 3I Atlas had once been. It looked less like a debris cloud and more like an artificial array, recalibrating itself for a new phase. Within hours, the fragment stabilized again, now forming a structure nearly 1,000,000 kilometers wide, each object glowing faintly in infrared, the same wavelength as the returning signal. It was as though the swarm had received instructions and was now executing them, reassembling into something with purpose, symmetry, and intelligence. As data poured in from Webb, Hubble, and radio telescopes worldwide, a chilling pattern emerged. The new arrangement of the swarm wasn't random at all. It matched the mathematical ratio of a neural network. Each fragment's position corresponded to a node, and the energy patterns linking them mirrored the firing activity of biological neurons. The swarm wasn't just moving, it was thinking. Heat fluctuations traveled across the structure in wave-like pulses, carrying information from one section to another in predictable cycles. When visualized, the entire formation behaved like an immense brain, processing input from the incoming signal and outputting energy patterns toward the sun. For the first time, astrophysicists began to consider a terrifying possibility. 3I Atlas wasn't a vessel or a machine. It was a distributed consciousness, a living network spanning thousands of fragments, capable of computation beyond any known scale. And now, that network had awakened, here, inside our solar system. As the swarm's configuration stabilized, instruments across the inner planets began to detect low-frequency oscillations in the background radiation. These weren't normal radio waves. They were gravitational harmonics, minute distortions rippling through space at precise intervals. Every oscillation matched the swarm's internal pulses, as if its very mass were vibrating in unison with the signal returning from deep space. What terrified researchers most wasn't the existence of these waves. It was their reach. The oscillations extended throughout the solar system, subtly influencing magnetic fields, solar wind density, and even planetary ionospheres. On Earth, sensors monitoring electromagnetic activity recorded faint but synchronized tremors in the ionosphere that aligned perfectly with the swarm's rhythm. The entire solar system had fallen into resonance with it, like a vast symphony of gravity, light, and energy responding to a single unseen conductor. And though no one could say what the next stage would be, one truth was inescapable. Something out there had activated 3I Atlas, and now the entire system was playing along. And then, without warning, everything stopped. The resonance that had swept across the solar system vanished as suddenly as it began. The oscillations, the synchronized pulses, even the faint hum recorded on Earth. Gone. The instruments went silent. The data streams flatlined, and for a brief, impossible moment, the background of space itself grew still. The swarm of 10,000 fragments froze in perfect symmetry, suspended between Mars and the asteroid belt like a vast metallic constellation. Then, slowly, one by one, the fragments began to dim, not fading into darkness, but blinking out, as though slipping into another state of existence. The James Webb Telescope captured the final frames before total silence. In infrared, the fragments glowed one last time, aligning into a single formation, a massive spiral pattern centered around the empty space where 3I Atlas had once been. And at its heart, for less than 2 seconds, an object reappeared, bright, dense, and impossibly hot, radiating energy in a frequency Webb had never recorded before. It wasn't thermal, it wasn't chemical, it was informational, a structured burst of encoded light, perfectly ordered, directed toward the sun. Then, it was gone. Moments later, the sun responded. For a fraction of a second, its outer corona flashed in the exact same frequency as the swarm's final transmission, before returning to normal. To most instruments, it meant nothing. But buried deep within the solar wind data was something chilling, the harmonic ratio that defined the entire swarm's geometry, now embedded in the flow of particles streaming toward every planet. The sun had absorbed the pattern and was now radiating it outward. Scientists around the world debated what had happened. Some insisted the event was a natural chain of plasma interactions. Others saw it for what it was, the completion of a cycle. 3I Atlas had not merely visited our solar system. It had used it, transforming the sun into a transmitter, carrying its encoded signal to the edges of space. The message wasn't a call, it was an activation, a sequence that needed a star to power it. And though the swarm is now gone, its echo remains. The solar wind hums with faint rhythmic pulses, the same intervals first recorded between the fragments, 6 long, 1 short, a cosmic heartbeat that never stops. Perhaps 3I Atlas was never a comet. Perhaps it was the seed of something older than civilization itself, a self-replicating intelligence using the stars as nodes, the planets as conductors, and time as its medium. Because if this wasn't a message to us, then it was a message through us. And somewhere, far beyond the sun, whatever sent 3I Atlas has just heard it.